series, Next Level. And I've told you before, I know that there are exceptions. The Bible makes very clear there always has been, always will be people who are apathetic to life. They're lazy, they're slothful, they're not interested in bettering their life in any way. Sad to say, we live in a state that has its fair share of people like that, probably. It's called the grasshopper mindset or the welfare mindset, where people aren't really interested in going to the next level in life. But I believe it's innate in every human being somewhere to want to better themselves, to do something they've never done, to be something they've never been, to accomplish some dreams, to feel like they're fulfilling purpose. I mean, since the time I was a kid, I've always felt like that my life was supposed to be for some important reason. Has anyone else felt that since childhood? Anyone else ever play superheroes when you were a kid? Yeah, I know that may be more common for boys than girls, but it's just this thing that it's just like you feel like you're supposed to do something great with your life. And I know that some people get so beat up by life at some point they give up on that and they don't even pursue those kind of thoughts anymore. But I still say it's ingrained from the time we're in our mother's womb that God weaves into our soul this desire just to go to the next level, the next level, the next level. And so we've presented this kind of like a staircase. And so the first night we talked about the very first step has to be taking 100% responsibility for your life. There's no other steps till you take that first step. You cannot bypass that step. That is the hardest step that any human being will ever make. Taking 100% responsibility, not blame shifting, not scapegoating, not saying, well, if I just had this or just had that. Taking 100% responsibility. Pride fights us on that one big time. The second step, and you can't change the order of it, the second step has to be being willing to change. It's fruitless to talk about going to the next level in life if we're not willing to change. Would you agree? You all know the very definition of insanity, right? Doing the same things the same way, expecting different results. That's the definition of insanity. But people do that all the time. In counseling, we call it the blowfly effect. The blowfly is like, if I hit that glass, again, just a little bit harder, maybe I can get through and get to the other side. He ends up dead in the windowsill, right? He's beat his brains out. Hannah asked me this week, Daddy, how long do those flies live once they get in the window? And I said, I don't know. I guess it depends on how many times they hit their head on the glass. Because they're there flying around, and a couple hours later, they're dead in the windowsill. They just beat their own brains out. So taking 100% responsibility for your life, step one. Step two, being willing to change. Then the steps can get a little more fluid in the order. But we've talked about breaking down being willing to change your character. Because studies have shown that the ripple effect from good character, being a person of integrity, takes you further in life than anything, naturally speaking. That people who have integrity are naturally promoted, people show them favor. So being willing to change in your character. And then the last time we talked about being willing to change our perspective. Because if you can't change how you're seeing something, you sure aren't going to change how you're doing something. You're sure not going to change being something else, are you? So those all make perfect sense, don't they? So now the staircase is going to get more and more fluid. And there's not going to be a particular order. I want to talk about what we're talking about tonight. Jonathan brought it up. It was like our first session. He brought up, I said, we're going to talk about that. Don't say anything else. I thought it was kind of fitting. In fact, if we'd been here last Wednesday night, it would have been the perfect time. It's just a few days after Easter, so I think it's the perfect time to talk about this tonight. And I want to read you a story from John 2 that I know that you've heard many, many times. I hope that you took me serious, those of you who stay up on Facebook, and I know a lot of you do because we know how many people see those things because it records it for us. So a whole lot of people, they see everything that we post on Facebook, even if you don't hit like or give me a heart or anything like that. I still know when people have seen it. So I hope you brought a notebook and a pen tonight because I'm going to ask you to do something that will be very beneficial to you. If you can do it in your head, that'll be fine, but you probably need to write it down so you can look at it if you can. So John 2, Verse 12 says, after this, what just happened? Oh, he changed water into wine, his very first miracle. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples, and there they stayed for a few days. It was almost time for the Jewish Passover. This was his very first of 3 Passovers after he entered his ministry. Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all them from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" You understand they're selling sacrifices for Passover. The whole concept of a Passover is that it's your sacrifice. You didn't just go buy it at the marketplace. You raised that sacrifice. You had vested interest in that sacrifice. So he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." And that comes from one of the Psalms. And the disciples clearly saw that as prophetic for Jesus, that he would be consumed with zeal for his Father's house. We understand his Father's house represents the kingdom of God. It represents what we would call ministry, probably would be a good word. Just the things of God, that he would be filled with zeal. And so, zeal, welcome runners, y'all must have walked, because y'all are faster than me. I know people hate it when I pick on them, but don't you love it, people that come in late and come to the front row? Because that's all that's left. Dan, you got to get here early if you want the front, the back row. You got to be one of the first ones in the building.
Well, I want to be close enough for you to spit on it.
Well, that could happen. It'll be the anointing, my brother. The anointing. So we look at this word zeal that Jesus had for the things of God, for ministry. And that word zeal is not really a word that we use anymore, is it? So if we want to interchange a modern day word, the word that we would put in its place is passion or passionate. They would say, oh, we remember now, the scripture said that he would be consumed with passion for the house of God, for the things of God, for ministry. Passion. Passion. It means strong and barely controlled emotion for something. Strong and barely controlled emotion for something. And the Bible talks about passion in a lot of scriptures in the New Testament. Paul talks a lot about passions. Sad to say, he's usually speaking about them in a negative way, though. Romans 1 being one of them where we see Paul saying because people gave in to their passions, their worldly passions, they became reprobate in their mind, and their conscience became seared. They could no longer be convicted. And God just turned them over to be reprobates. That's how powerful passion can be. Not just, Paul wasn't just talking about any old sin. We all battle 101 sins. He was talking about the things that we're very passionate about, something that draws us to the point that we're strong and barely controlled by the emotion of that thing. But this is a story that tells us about how Jesus was filled with zeal, passion for something, so strong, barely controlled in his emotional realm that he picked up straps and he wound them together and he made a whip and he did something they really didn't expect Jesus to do. He chased out the people, and if you notice, because a lot of people don't really talk about it, he didn't just chase out the money changers, he chased out the cattle and everything else that was being sold for sacrifices. The sheep, he chased it all out. And because that part of the temple was supposed to be dedicated to prayer and to seeking the face of God. And no part of it was supposed to be about buying sacrifices. So, how many of you guys are familiar with the passage in Matthew 6:21 that talks about where your treasure is, your heart will be also? Everyone familiar with that? And people get it out of order sometimes. Where your treasure is, your heart will be. Where your heart is, your treasure will be. It doesn't matter. The point is your heart and your treasure is in the same place. But to a great extent, that's talking about the passions of life. That whatever draws your heart to something specific, you can't get away from it. It's always on your heart. It's on your mind. It's emotional for you. that you will actually invest treasure there. How many pairs of running shoes you guys got? A lot, right? Because your heart's into running. I have a lot of pair of running shoes. Your treasure, your heart. You'll invest in the things that are close to your heart, the things that you're passionate about. Passion, it's those things that drive you in life. It's sad, but I can make that statement, and there will be people who will say, but nothing drives me in life. We all know people that clearly are not driven by anything. That doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to be driven by something. They definitely have the potential to be filled with passion because they're made in the image of God. We see the picture of Jesus. He is the picture of how we're made. We are made to be filled with passion for things. What drives you? What preoccupies you? A passion, that's how you separate just these 50 things that you kind of like in life and the things you're passionate about. I fixed pork chops on the grill tonight. I told my wife, I said, I think these are the best pork chops I've ever had in my life. Hannah said, what's wrong with these pork chops? They don't taste right. I used a lot of garlic salt. They were really good. I love pork chops. I would take a pork chop over a steak as much as I like steak, because it's hard to get a good steak. It's hard to get a bad pork chop. Am I telling the truth? It's hard to get a bad pork chop. I love pork chops. I am not preoccupied by pork chops. It may sound like it right now. I am not preoccupied by pork chops. I love to eat, believe it or not. I've been blessed with a very fast system that cannibalizes and metabolizes food really, really fast. But I love food. I'm not preoccupied by food, except for when I'm hungry or after a run. But I don't lay in bed at night thinking about food. What demands your time? It demands your time and resources. I'm not talking about the things that you have to do. I'm talking about the things that you don't have to do in life, and yet there's something in you that demands that time, demands the resources, and you're okay to spend the resources. You're okay to spend the time. You're looking for time to spend on that. You're looking at your calendar and you're trying to figure out, how can I spend more time doing that thing? You're trying to figure out how to get away from some of the things you have to do that thing that you're passionate about. That's passion. So here's what I want you to do in your head, or if you have a pen and paper. I want you, without thinking about it, trust me, you don't have to think about it. I want you, as quick as you can, to write down 5 things that you're passionate about. If you don't have pen and paper, write it in your head. 5 things that you're passionate about. You may come up with 1 or 2 real quick and then have to start thinking. You may not have 5 things you're passionate about. You may only have 1 thing, or 2 things, or 3 things, or 4 things. You may have 20 things. I want the 5 fastest things that pop to your mind that you're passionate about. So when I did this morning, I thought it was interesting that when I looked at it, that it actually was in pretty much a chronological order. Okay, now I'm getting ready to tell you something I should have already told you to preface it, and you're going to have to scratch some things off. I don't want you to list God. Everyone's scratching. I don't want you to list ministry. Yeah. I don't want you to list my husband, my wife, my children. Because we're going to assume that everybody in here is already passionate for those things. I'm trying to find those extra things that God has put in you, because we're going to try to figure out how to use those things in the bigger picture of life. Somewhere within our passions, there's a code that often leads us to our purpose in life. So it's through discovering our passions, realizing our passions, that we often discover purpose. We all know we're all supposed to be passionate about God. We may not be. A lot of Christians that go to church are not truly passionate about God, if we're honest, okay? But we know we're supposed to be, so we're going to write that down anyway, because it's politically correct. We know we're all supposed to be passionate about our children, even if we're not. We know we have to lie and say, I'm very passionate about my kids, even when we want to kill our kids. I want to passionately kill them. So we know with our marriage, within those kinds of relationships, primary relationships in life, we know automatically there's passion there, or we wouldn't have those relationships. Even if you're someone who would say, Pastor Scott, I just don't think I really am that passionate about God. Well, if you're here tonight, you may be more passionate than you think. So give yourself a break, okay? Because passion is a very broad term, right? You have passion for God or you wouldn't be here tonight. Nobody comes to church on Wednesday night out of ritualism. Maybe on Sunday mornings, not on Wednesday nights, okay? Only hungry people come on Wednesday nights. So 5 things. Now some of you said that I can hear you. It's like, well, I just had to scratch out my whole list and now I don't know what to put. Don't think about it. Just write it down. Even if it's something you're not putting time in right now. If it's something you've dreamed about, and it's got no further than your dreams, that's perfectly okay. Write that down. Something you've always wanted to do, but you never seemingly can find the time. But that thing's always been there. It's always been in your heart. Someday. That means there's a passion in there for that thing, even if you haven't put your hands to it yet. So I noticed when I did this that there was somewhat of an order to mine with the priorities. I wrote them down as fast as I could. I wrote music, teaching, history, landscaping, and running. I have other passions, but these were the 5 things that jumped off of the page of my heart quickly. And I looked at that and I realized there was an order to that. I bet you it did not take me 3 seconds to write those things down. And I looked at it and said, music is my number 1 passion outside of God and my family. Seriously, outside of God and my family. Music is I've often thought, many times when I've gotten injured, guys, and couldn't run, like the past week, I did run this morning though, I've thought, well, at least I still have music. I never run, but I think, boy, if I couldn't run, my life would be over. It would just be sad. But I have many times thought if I could no longer play music, I think I'd be very hollow inside and I'd probably battle a lot of depression. Because once you've played music and it's a primary part of your life for pretty much your whole life, it's just, it becomes, music has arts. The arts have a way of mingling into your soul in ways that you don't know how to separate things. I quickly listed teaching because teaching is the only thing, it's the only reason I pastor. I hate all the other parts. I don't hate all the other parts. I'm not in love with a lot of the other parts of pastoring. And I've told you before, if you want to pay someone to do all the stuff I do except for teach, I'll teach for free. But you got to pay me for all that other stuff. I don't fix commodes for free. And I listed history because I love history. I can't get enough history. Sometimes I feel guilty because at night I watch so much of the History Channel and the military channel and stuff like that. It's like I feel like I've been in these wars. And Hannah will sit down with me and I'll tell her everything that's happening before they even talk about it. She'll say, Daddy, how do you know all this stuff? I say, baby, because I am passionate about history. I'm passionate about landscaping. It aches that I can't mulch. I had to pay 2 of our young men to mulch the church last week. I've never had to worry about that stuff before, but I couldn't do it this year. And I'm going to pay those same young men to mulch my yard. And I look forward to that. It's therapeutic for me to trim bushes and to plant flowers and to trim the Japanese maples and make them look like giant bonsais every year. It's like I am into that, man. And running is very significant to me. If it made my top 5 list, it's pretty important to me. And so when I get injured and I can't run, it affects my life. My wife will tell you that I'm not as pleasant to live with when I can't run. Why? Because of just the physical action of running? No, the emotional inaction of not running is what gets me. Okay. Look at your list. How many have 5? Can I see your hand? All right. You got 5 there. Does anybody have 0? We're going to help you a little bit if you do. Don't feel bad about that. How many of you guys would say that at least one of your passions on your list is something that you spend a great deal of time and resource with? Can I see your hand? Okay. How many of y'all would say that you have 2 or more passions that you spend a lot of time or resources on? Okay, very good. And how many of you guys would say that that your passion, hobbies can be passions, right? Obviously, a hobby can definitely be a passion. Some of the things I like, running can be a hobby, landscaping can be a hobby, music can be a hobby. All these things can be hobbies, but somehow there's a passion for some of those things that's just a little different. How many of you guys have been able to see where some of your passions can be used by God for something bigger than yourself? If you can't raise your hand, it's okay. Just hold on. We're going to get to you. But how many of you all would raise your hand and say, I can see how God is using some of my passions for something bigger than just entertaining me or for my own enjoyment, right? So somehow that's the goal God's going to try to drive us to, because passion only comes from one place, God. We just came through Easter, the Passion of the Christ. A lot of people say, well, why do they call that the Passion of Christ? How many have seen the movie? If you were here Sunday, the video excerpts that just, every year I see that, it's hard to get up and preach after that because I become so emotional with those scenes. Mel Gibson calls it the Passion of the Christ because in Catholic history, that's what the whole beating, crucifixion was called, the Passion of Christ. What that literally means, if we take this definition, strong and barely controlled emotion, the greatest of passion means that I'm so emotional about this, so strongly emotional about this, that I'm even willing to go through pain for it. And that's why it's called the Passion of the Christ. Was he passionate for the cross? Of course not. Was he passionate to get beat? Of course not. He was passionate for us. It's called the Passion of the Christ because he felt so much emotion for us that he was willing to endure that kind of pain. Well, I have things listed here that I endure some pain. Passion here, I was looking at some different people's perspective on passion, just their ideas. Nothing official, nothing scientific, just asking famous people, what do you think passion is? How would you explain, how would you define passion? I love this one. Passion is to love something so much you even love it when you hate it. For me, that's running. Okay? Because there's pain involved. There's pain. There was pain this morning for the first mile, and then my back started loosening up, and then I just started having the time of my life. But there was pain. Sometimes there's pain in the middle of the run. Sometimes there's pain after a run. Landscaping. I've endured a lot of pain with landscaping. A lot of sunburns. You know, a lot of back injuries and sore muscles. And you know, I've went through some pain with music. I mean, in the 80s, we see all the glory stuff on TV from the 80s, but those of us that were plowing the field, so to speak, for the people coming later, we took a lot of pop shots. And I tell you, our band, we got shredded by Christian authors sometimes, like newspaper people, journalists and stuff like that. They didn't understand this Christian rock and roll thing yet and assumed it was all of the devil. And I mean, people would come to our concerts and there would be articles afterwards that just would make you, if you weren't determined and very focused on what you felt like God wanted you to do, you would just flip everybody off and say, forget it, I'm not doing it anymore. And I remember when we opened for Stryper, how many people even know who Stryper is? Okay. We opened for Stryper, and of course the worst place in the world was Lynchburg, Virginia, because all of Jerry's kids were there with signs picketing EC Glass Auditorium that night. People could hardly get into the auditorium. You know, the devil worshippers and people were writing all kinds of, Jimmy Swagger and all these people were writing all these articles on Stryper that had never been to one of those concerts. Didn't have a clue who they were, but were judging them and writing just defamatory stuff, terrible things. And so things changed down there in Lynchburg eventually, and a lot of bands like Jars of Clay and stuff, a lot of good bands came out of that school. But that's not how it started out. It was very legalistic down there. And reporters came in that night, and a reporter came in from the school down there. What's the name of the school? Liberty. See, I don't even want to remember stuff like that. A reporter came from Liberty, wanted to do an article on that, and Michael Sweet wouldn't do the interview with them. So he came to me, and I'm a nobody, but I gave him the interview. And you could just tell. I mean, you were being set up with every question. There's not a passion that I have that there has not been pain involved. Battling discouragement. And yet it's something you love so much. You love it even in those moments when you hate it. Because when you hate it, it's just for a few moments or a few days. And then it comes back. That's what passion does. Passion. Passion. The pain doesn't diminish the passion. Discouragement doesn't completely obliterate the passion. You may lay down. I'll never forget 2 years ago when I pulled a piriformis muscle and was in rehab. It wasn't getting any better. I couldn't run for like 4 months, and I finally got discouraged, and I had a pity party. And I got this big tub, and I had like 12 pair of running shoes. I put them all in this tub. My wife was working downstairs in the basement, and you know what? I knew if I took them down there, I'd never see them again. I took them down there right beside where she was working, and to make a point, I just dropped the tub right there beside her, and I walked back up the steps. I was trying to make a statement as I was pitying myself. It's like, it's over. I'm not doing it anymore. I was going up the steps, and I heard her say, "You're not fooling anybody. You'll be back down here to get these shoes in just a few days." Of course, she was right. The pain doesn't diminish it. It's something that's lodged in you. It's bigger than you. It's spiritual. So, if you're one that's struggling tonight to find your passions or your passion, not everybody has a whole bunch of passions. I've just always been a kid that was just liked a lot of things. That's not necessarily a strength to have multiple passions. Sometimes it's better to have one passion and really be passionate about it and really be good at it and really be involved with it and making it bigger than yourself. There's no rule that says 3 passions is better than 2 passions, okay? We're all different. But there are a lot of people who would honestly say, I really don't know what my passion is. I really don't have it. When I made the list, there just really wasn't much on the list. I want you to know it's in there. We just got to figure out how to find it and how to pull it out. And I'm going to give you a series of questions tonight that will help you at least begin to discover what some of your passions may be. Because you may be surprised how passion starts. Think about anything you put on that list tonight. Look at your list and ask yourself, when did these passions start? Pick any one of those passions. Take your first one, number 1 on the list. Ask yourself, when did that start? How old was I? Where was I? What did I see? What did I experience that kick-started that? Most of you aren't going to be able to answer that question. I don't know why I've always been a history buff. I don't consider myself an academic at all, but I've always loved history. It's fascinated me. I went by Straley School today, and the bookmobile was out front. Anybody know what the bookmobile? I know you know because they come to your school. It used to be a semi when I was a kid, and it would come to our school, and it couldn't get on our school property, so it'd park on a main street in town, and we would have a little field trip every time we come, and we'd go to the bookmobile because there wasn't anything newer than probably 200 years old in our school library. And there wasn't anything there worth reading. And the bookmobile, it had all these like plastic covers on there that just drew you in. And every time I would go there and I would get a book that somehow would revolve around history, figures in history, a lot of war stuff. I was always fascinated by that. I remember there was a book, Andrew Jackson and the Battle of New Orleans. If I didn't check that book out 20 times as a kid and read it, I didn't check it out once. And the other night, Hannah and I was watching the War of 1812 and what a debacle, an insane debacle that started out, and how it ended the way it did. You cannot look at American history and not see God's fingerprints on it. It's impossible. It's just impossible. We should have lost every war we've ever been in. We've been outmanned, outgunned, out technological. We've been out everything in every single war we've ever been in. It's had to be God, because it was about something bigger than us. And the last battle, of course, of the War of 1812, which actually happened in 1815, this last battle, technically it was over. They signed peace treaties in Germany, and the news hadn't gotten to everybody yet. And that battle it amazed me, because, and the Lord was trying to show me something of that. I realize that now, because Andrew Jackson just had this ragtag army. A few Indians here, a few slaves over here, volunteers over here, no actual regular army. He had like 2,000 people in his army. The British, the elite fighting force on the planet, had 10,000 men, and they were getting ready to come to shore. And Andrew Jackson was just so smart. It's like, instead of walking out on a field and taking turns shooting each other like we usually do, why don't we hide behind some cotton bales this time? It was brilliant. Incredible that nobody had thought about that before. Digging trenches. It was called ramparts. And they used mud and cotton bales. And the stupid British just kept marching down, with their red suits, with the big target right there on their chest, big white X, shoot right here, hit me here. And they would stop and they would shoot. And when that battle was over, America lost, we had like 12 soldiers killed. And the British lost like 2,500. And it's like, I was fascinated by that. Mostly because of Andrew Jackson's army of misfits. Kind of looked like Cornerstone Family Church. I see that now. Let me ask you a few questions here to help you figure out what your passions are, because they may be just lying dormant in you, and they may have tried to kickstart several times, and you just didn't recognize it, and maybe now you'll know to devote a little more time. Questions that matter. Okay, question number 1. What subject could you read 500 books about without ever getting bored? For me, it's anything with history. Maybe with you, it's a cookbook. I don't know. A book on whatever. What could you read? And it doesn't have to be 500 books. That's just a number. What could you read and read and read about and never get bored because you enjoy that subject, that topic, just that much? I promise you, whatever that is, it's an indicator to a passion in you. Some of you already see that. Some of you just wrote down something that was on your top 5 list. Second question. What could I do 5 straight years without getting paid and be just fine with? That is a real indicator of a passion. Some say, man, I'll do this. You don't even have to pay me. That's why I say, I would never take a paycheck for teaching and preaching. It's a passion. I love it. I'm driven by it. After 24 years of pastoring and 36, 37 years of ministry, I am no less excited about teaching than I was when I was a very, very young man. What is it that you would say, man, I could do this for the next 5 years and you wouldn't even have to pay me for it? That's a passion indicator. Here's something. What would I spend my time doing if I were financially independent? And you can't say sleep, because that's what my wife would say. I'd sleep. That's a good one. That one really had me thinking today. What would I do if I were financially independent, did not have to work, had all kinds of money in the bank? What would I spend my time doing? I know my wife and I both know what we do. We travel a lot. Some of you guys would too. I would do that because I'm interested in history, in culture. We love going to other countries, slumming the cities, going to museums, seeing how the culture is working there. Man, I would just travel and travel and travel. I'd also buy a 40 Willys coupe because that's one of my passions I have not been able to explore just yet. But I would like to. But I would have to be financially independent. Because the one I want costs $150,000. Another question. What gets your blood racing whenever you think about doing it or you are doing it? Really just gets you going. The endorphins start flowing. All those feel-good chemicals of the human brain are being released. Even if it makes you tired, even if it hurts, even if there's a few discouragements to battle here and there, oh, you love how it makes you feel. I used to be passionate about deer hunting. And, some passions, you look back and you're passionate about something you're not passionate about anymore. I think that's normal human behavior. I'd like to think so. And I just lost my interest over time. When we planted the church here, I didn't have the same time that I used to have. And then when we sold our farm and moved into town, I didn't have the same hunting advantages that I used to have out there with all the other farms connected together where the good bucks are at. I just slowly lost interest. But my wife used to say, what in the world drives you to get up so early in the morning when it's so stinking cold and go set in the woods? Because it doesn't make a lot of sense, naturally speaking. But isn't that a true picture of passion? It's like, I don't care how cold it is. Y'all ever run in the cold? To the point that you have to go to the tent and be heated up for a little while, almost ready to go to the hospital, the ER? Well, why would someone do that, Daniel? You don't unless you're passionate about something. You just don't. You have to have passion. So what gets your blood racing when you think about it or you're doing it? A last question here is, what can't you imagine your life what can't you imagine being taken from your life? And we'll simplify this question. Something that you're passionate about right now, something you're doing, you're investing time and resources into. It's a very important part of your life. You're very passionate about. What is something that you say, I can't imagine my life without that? I used music as an example for me. I could use anything actually on my top 5 list without those things. It would diminish the quality of my life. And people say, well, Jesus should be enough for you. Well, you've got to understand, God gave us these things. These things are not bad. They're not anti-Christ. They're not taking anything away from our God, loving our God. You have to understand, when we say we love God, we're all blowing smoke to some degree. Because our emotional attachment to an unseen God can only go so far. And that's why it's our tangible attachments to God that fills in the gaps. We sure won't say, like the New Age movement, do you see that tree out there? Well, that tree is God. The goose is God. The grass is God. But we definitely would say God's in those things. He created us. And just like if you knit something or you cook something that's familiar to us, we'll go, well, I can see you in that. What we're saying is I can see your personality in that. I can see your heart in that. Well, we connect with God through those things. We identify with God through all kinds of things like that. What can't you imagine your life without? And maybe it's something you never thought about before tonight, it being a passion. But now this will help you put a spotlight on that. Boy, there's this one thing I do. I can't imagine my life without this. And it could be something that, in fact, it's going to be something probably that doesn't seem very spiritual to you. Or to anyone else. Working out at the gym may not seem very spiritual. But when they opened this fitness center, I spent 6 months with 2 other pastors writing a curriculum for a class that never really did take off. Talking about wholeness, body, soul, and spirit, and how all 3 are linked together. And anybody in here that's ever exercised, worked out, ran, or whatever, you know you feel better about yourself when you're doing those things. You feel better spiritually, you feel better emotionally, it bleeds into your relationships, your mental health. You know that's the truth. Those things are all connected. So my point is that these passions in us, they don't have to seem all that spiritual to in fact be spiritual. How you answer those questions will help you define what some of your passions are. So passion, with some passions we have that eureka moment where we'll be somewhere, we'll see something, it'll kickstart something in us, it'll ignite something in us, and boom, it's like suddenly we're drawn to that. Next thing you know, that's like a primary hobby. It's something we're doing with all of our spare time. But it's just you were in that one place for that one moment. You saw something, you experienced something, and it triggered something. You became very interested all of a sudden in that, and now it's an important part of your life. That's called a eureka moment, where suddenly you see something that you never really thought about, and bam, now I'm into this. It happens with people all the time, with sports and recreations and hobbies. It happens as we get this more spiritual, it happens in ministry all the time. That's why we're always saying, sign up and serve, serve, serve. It's not just that we need you to serve because we need warm bodies, even though we do. It's because we know that if we put you in these positions to serve and give your life away, the Spirit of God's going to use that to connect you to some passions in you, things you didn't even realize that you loved or was even that good at. You may be surprised. Not everybody has those eureka moments, though. So for those who haven't really had those eureka moments, and you're struggling to find the passions in you, then here's just some little things that can help you. Just things that may not help everybody, but will help some people. I like this suggestion from one psychologist. Think back to your childhood and the passions you had as a child. Think back. Say, well, my passion was to play with Barbie dolls. Well, what could that be an indicator of, though? I had a huge passion for Matchbox cars when I was a kid. Most of y'all are too young to even know what I'm talking about, because Matchbox cars changed and they weren't like they were in the old days. I still have my Matchbox cars because they remind me of something I was very, very passionate. And I would get those things out, build little cities and roads and stuff, and I could sit in my bedroom floor for hours, and I was just on cloud nine. I was very emotional about it. Well, probably I was about 18 years old, and I found a new passion in life that at the time I didn't think about connecting back to Matchbox cars. It was another thing like deer hunting, only I wasn't as passionate as long as with deer hunting as many years. It was drag racing. And I was into drag racing. I was one of the original cruisers in this little town. Some of y'all don't know what that was like, but it was incredible, wasn't it? You better not agree with me too much. You're going to date yourself, Amy. It was incredible. Bumper to bumper. Go through town. Take you 30, 45 minutes to get through town. Turn around and go right back through. Later on, people were cruising in their daddy's station wagon or their mom's minivan. Not in our days. Almost everything on the road was something you would only see on a drag strip nowadays. I had a Barracuda, man, and I used to love to be at a red light, the first one up there, look around, make sure there's no cops, pop the clutch, pull the front tires off the ground. It was all about impressing the girls. Everything was about impressing the girls. Could have cared less about impressing the boys. I was passionate. We would go down to a couple drag strips that were about an hour and a half from here. There was nothing local here at the time, and oh my gosh, on Saturday nights we would drag race and come back home. We'd be too tired to cap the headers back, come back through those two tunnels with open headers. It was so loud. It was awesome. Testosterone, endorphins. It was just, well, how would that work with some people? Well, some people could run that gamut and find out they're just very passionate to work on cars. They love cars. Josh loves cars. Ends up being a vocation. Vocations don't last very long if you're not somewhat passionate about it, huh, Josh? I would think working in a garage will get old real quick if you're not passionate about what you're doing. Well, why is that spiritual? Well, first of all, because you're providing for your family, which God is very pleased with. You're working a job that yes, there'll be some stress, but the passion will counterbalance that, where you come home and you can still be a good daddy or whatever the job may be, because you don't despise your job and come home and take it out on the dog, your wife, and your kids every night. It's the marketplace where we do Jesus-style evangelism. And I know you do. You're always having conversations with guys, and sometimes they land, and sometimes you get frustrated because they're clearly not landing. I know, we've talked about it. Doesn't matter. Your job is to have those conversations. Your job is to never have the power to decide the fruit. The Lord of the harvest has to do that. All we can do is plant seed. These things are more spiritual than you think. So think back to your childhood. What passions you have? Put yourself in discovery mode somehow for a season like outside of just entertainment. I fear that in America, we're so busy being entertained, we're so involved in recreation, we don't ponder anymore, we don't meditate anymore. We don't just get alone and think, get inside of ourselves. And that's one of the things that psychiatrists talk about, that or psychologists, that one of the problems in America is that we don't, what they call, get inside themselves anymore. They don't know what makes themselves tick. They don't know themselves. That's why everybody feels lost. They don't know who they are, because everyone's just going through the motions. I go here, I do that, I eat that, I go to work, I brush my teeth, I go here, and then our lives in America are very much spent in entertainment. You know, we're watching TV, we're watching movies, we're playing video games, we're going to sporting events, we're being entertained. And entertainment comes from, what's the word? It's the word to ponder something. What's the word? Amusement. Amusement comes from the word a and muse. Muse is Latin. It means to think. A puts not to at the front of that. Amusement means not to think. And that's what we do in America. We put ourselves in situations where we're not thinking because when we're being entertained. So you put yourself in discovery mode. Ponder your life. Think about your childhood. Think about the things that you're passionate about. Travel, read, explore, try new things, see new things. You want passion in your life? There's nothing there. It means you're going to have to find something new. Read a book. Go some places that you don't normally go. We're very much habit creatures. We're not as bad as people who live in the big cities like New York. You know, the average person lives in New York City, Manhattan, for example, Queens, Bronx, wherever. Do you know that the majority of them spend their whole life within about 6 square blocks? Because everything's there, the stores are there and everything. They don't travel. The average New Yorker does not get in the minivan and go to Florida on vacation. Or go to Kansas to see the tumbleweeds. Yeah, they don't, because they think everything is there. And they feel sorry for people like us. And they don't understand that we're actually feeling sorry for them. Put yourself in those kind of discovery modes where you're traveling, you're reading, you're exploring, you're trying new things, seeing new things. If you've got a hobby, explore the benefits of your hobby that might be bigger than you. Some people say, well, I just collect stamps. How's that supposed to help somebody? I don't know. But I know there's a whole lot of hobbies out there that can be broad and bigger than just that person's hobby. A lot of hobbies. If you don't believe it, if your hobby is cooking, I will prove to you that your hobby is bigger than you. I'll prove it to you. You bring me the fruits of your labors, of your hobby, and I will show you how that can minister to somebody else. I promise you. Here's something. If you're struggling to find your passions, what you're good at, ask friends and families what they see as your gifts and abilities. Just go have some conversations. Say, hey, you've known me a long time. Just being real honest with me. Just tell me some things that you think that I'm naturally prone to, some gifted areas, some things that you think I'm good at. What are the things that you see me enjoying the most in life? Get some outside feedback there. Sometimes we need those unbiased voices in our life. Here's something to think about. It's a question. These last two are back to questions again. What gets you excited when you see other people doing it? You know, whatever it is. Running, drag racing, cooking, whatever it is. What is it when you see other people do it? It makes you excited. You go, wow, that would be so cool. Every time you see that, you respond a little emotional about it. And last of all, passions are always going to be linked to our dreams in some way. What have you dreamed of but never put your hands to? Because I promise you that's going to be one of your easiest ways to locate a passion in you. Something you've always dreamed about. You've never put your hands to it out of fear. You've just been convinced, oh, I couldn't do that. I'd fail at that. You know how we humans are. We don't do 90% of our dreams because we're the fear of failure. But what is it that you've always dreamed about? Not just something that was a fleeting moment. You saw something, oh, that's a great idea. 36 hours later, you're not even thinking about it. I'm talking about dreams that you can't let go of. Man, when I was 10, 11, and 12 years old, even though I was incredibly insecure, I was shy as the day is long, scared of everything, I dreamed about preaching. It had to be God. It couldn't have been my makeup. And so I started doing it in the neighborhood with the kids. I gathered all the kids in the neighborhood, and we had church. I took up offerings. I was a real pastor. And I could never understand, why am I always seeing myself doing this? Why am I always dreaming about this? And yet, there's no part of my natural makeup that is given to that. Boldness and courage and being a good talker and all those kind of things. A lot of guys like me in these positions, we feel like Moses. You know, Moses saying, well, let Aaron go speak for me, Father, because you know I'm not very eloquent at speech. My wife is constantly correcting my speech. I tell her I'm trying to do better, but God did not call me because of my strengths. He called me because of my weaknesses. And He knows that guys like me will probably give Him a whole lot of credit for any good thing we do, because we know we're just not good talkers. We're like Carrie on King of Queens, if you've ever seen that episode. Paul. Passion. We'll talk about this later on, how passion without action yields nothing. We're going to talk about the action part of things. Forget that tonight. What I want you to know is life without passion yields existence and nothing more. Passion is the true life in us. And now we take that and we add to that passion for God, passion for ministry, passion for our children. How many of you guys are passionate for your kids? Oh my gosh. Hannah and these band kids are all leaving tomorrow night, getting on a bus, heading to Disney, and won't be back till Monday morning sometime. And I'm already having a little emotional breakdown about it. She's never been gone more than 3 days to King's Fest, but Miss Pam's there, so we don't worry about it. They're going to throw these kids to the wolves. They're going to be going to 2 Universal parks and all the Disney parks with park hoppers and their little groups of 4 going wherever they want, whenever they want. And there ain't going to be any adults with them when they're hopping. I'm struggling with it, but I've got to let her spread her wings and fly. I wish that the Disney trip is every 4 years. That's so that every kid that's in the high school band will get a Disney trip while they're there. And I wish it was later when she was a senior. But I'm passionate about my child. When she's running track, I am much more passionate about her running than my own running. Much more. The things she puts her hands to academically and whatever, I get much more excited about what she's doing than what I'm doing, because I'm very passionate about my child. And I know that you guys are too. So, our passions, that is where life is. Jesus said, I've come to give you life and life abundant. What does that tangibly mean? Oh, I'm saved, so I should have abundant life. I've talked to many people who were saved that had no life at all, and they were confused. Where's this abundant life I heard about? Your abundant life is found in your passions. And yes, a lot of those passions now then will be brought into ministry. because ministry is the most fulfilling passions you'll ever have. If I was a school teacher, I'd be very passionate about teaching. I'd love to be a history teacher. I would really love it. I can promise you it would not be near as fulfilling as using my passion of teaching to disciple people. Wouldn't even be close. Passion. Passion. I've said all I'm going to say. Hidden within your passions is the creative force of God. It's hidden within your passions. And guys, to explore our passions, we're going to have to become intentional. You all know that is my single favorite word in the English language, intentional. I have found nothing in my life good has ever happened without me being intentional. Nothing's ever been dropped in my lap. I jump on Mark and Clinton in there all the time. I don't jump on them. I just give them a hard time because they make music look so easy to me. It never came easy to me. I've had to work hard for everything I've ever accomplished in any area of life. I told these guys Monday night when I couldn't run with them, I voiced some frustrations about not being able to run again for a few days. I said, I'm just going to settle in that, my ceiling is a 23, 24-minute 5K runner, and I'm just going to learn to enjoy that and not push myself past that. The trouble is when you're passionate about something, you push yourself. You push yourself. Even if it's not realistic, you push yourself. It's never enough. Passion, man. It's where life is found. And it's more godly than what people think. Passion is the gift of God. So I want you to intentionally go into discovery mode, activation mode. If you know where your passions are at, but you have not been active, passion without action will not take you anywhere in life that you're not already at. I'll tell you that. It will be the blowfly effect again. You'll just keep beating the glass till you're laying in the windowsill dead. You'll have to become intentional with your passions. And if you will, I want you to be prepared to watch God begin to open doors of ministry. Real life, Jesus-style ministry. Jeremy, when you're bowling. Are you passionate about bowling, Jeremy? I think you are. Do you think that's an opportunity for ministry? Yep. That's Jesus-style evangelism. He was not a teacher in the temple. He was a teacher in the marketplace where you guys are at every day. All right. Enough said about that. All right. So we're past Easter. I don't know where we're going Sunday. I just know last week was good. Everything was good last week. And I'm ready just to kick back and have some conversation about something good Sunday. And those are my favorite Sundays. When there's no plan, and let's just see where it goes. My favorite Sundays. Hearts and minds clear. Anybody want to share anything about your passion? Got a weird passion you want to tell everybody about? A weird passion you don't want anyone to know about? Your dad does? Would you like to share it with us, Elizabeth? Your dad's weird passion?
I can't think of anything right now, sorry.
Yeah, right. You can tell me later. And then I'll tell everybody Sunday morning. I love you guys. Thank you for being